I was doing a tarot reading for someone earlier last year, and they were going through a breakup and it was really difficult. And we always talk about how one of our strengths is like relationship building and being able to connect with other people. Um, but I was doing this tarot reading for someone, and it was the first time I've ever done it for her. I like we really connected, and she was like, "Thank you so much. Like this gave me so much insight." And I fully took on the role as her healer and was like, "No problem. I'm your healer from now on. I'm your
I
healer
love it.
forward."
I love it. You with like your tarot cards like tuned in, like I am your healer. No, I love it. I think like there's really something to be said about how to like create and like develop and like sustain meaningful relationships. And I don't even just mean creating meaningful relationships in that it's like this long lasting deep relationship, blah blah blah, but even just like the ability to connect with people and like create that like connection, um connect with people and create connection, say you know what I mean. Like just like the ability to like to do just that. Like I'm just repeating myself at this point. And like not everyone can do it. Like because I think
No.
it takes a really high level of awareness, of like self-awareness and like awareness of others very quickly.
Mhm.
Um and we've talked about this a lot, but it takes a very high level of empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I feel like it's funny because relationship building comes so natural, and I feel like when I meet someone, I can easily build a connection with them. But
Yeah.
and I feel it's the same for you.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I feel like with the pandemic and like this virtual lifestyle, it's become a lot harder, of course, to build genuine connection. And I also find that even in just like meetings at work or meetings in general, I've become the most awkward person, like socially awkward person. I've almost forgotten like any social skills. I've developed like a social anxiety. So it's interesting how, you know, being thrown into this crazy world that we're in now, how it really changes your perception and your ability to connect with others. Because I feel like even though I have even though I'm able to easily build connection, I'm like really struggling in the pandemic.
Yeah, I totally agree because I think that the way like we, and I'll say we because like I know we both do this, like the way that we build connection is through like understanding body language, like being able to like read people's like nonverbal cues and like understand and understand them on like a like not just like a verbal level. Like you don't necessarily have to say for me to understand like how you might be feeling about something or whatever. And like it's so hard to do that. And that's also how we project. Like we're very open, we're very
Yeah.
inviting, like our body language is very friendly. Like um but I think it's so hard to do that over Skype or like Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that you're using, where because it's so hard to read people's body language or even to like emote
Yeah.
body language. And like a lot of times people don't put on their camera and then it makes it even harder. It's like the struggle with like text communication where it's like you don't know because it's like just this like text and like you don't know how the person means it.
Yeah. Yes, that's like that is my worst nightmare, interpreting texts, because you could be catching someone at the worst time, which I feel like I've been the person who would like send off a dry text, even though I don't mean
Yeah.
for it in a dry tone, but you'll be in the middle of doing 10 things because our lives are so intertwined within like
Yeah.
every layer that you just don't
Yeah.
realize. But yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying.
I think then too, like it really makes you wonder if we are people who are um able to make connections quickly or kind of like draw people in, just not in any way, but other than to just like we're like easygoing enough. I'm like laughing at myself saying we're easygoing because like we're absolutely not. But like
Yeah.
in the situation where we can like build, like make friendships or like create connection, I think about how it's so hard for us, and then how hard it is for people who are more reserved or like
Mhm.
who take a little bit longer to like open up. And like the pandemic is either good for them because they're, you know, like it's kind of like what you said, where it's like they have social anxiety and so they no longer have to participate in those like anxiety inducing situations of like being in groups or having to introduce yourself or like figure out what's happening. Or it makes you feel even more isolated because you can't even like push past the whatever it might be when you're, the barriers that might be there when you're with somebody physically. You like can't even push past it because like it's literally like cameras off,
Yeah.
the person's on mute, and you're talking and you're like, I'm talking to like a black void. Like,
Yeah. And it's exactly what you said too, like the inability to show emotion or to like emote anything.
yeah,
I
yeah,
find that at work, it's exactly what you said about talking into a black hole, like, or a black void. Sometimes you'll be speaking and nobody will answer you on the other side. But it's
yeah,
not because people are trying to be rude. It's just because that's become the norm in
yeah.
conversation.
And also because like it's just so hard. It's like, oh, is somebody else going to say something? Am I going to interrupt them? Like what am I going to say? Like it's just it's so hard, I feel like, to communicate over like Zoom and stuff. Um but also like at least for me, like I really thrive, or like I really pick up and then go off of like other people's energies towards me. So like I feel like I'm probably to a fault like sensitive of people's like sensitive of like how people like speak to me, or like if they say something like in a slightly off tone, I'm like, oh, like are they mad? Like is something off? Like I wonder what's happening, like da da da. Um but not being able to like get that from people is also hard for me. Like not being able to like understand that or like receive that from people, where I can receive their how they mean to come across, is like difficult for me to communicate, because I'm like, oh, like did you mean this in a good way? Did you mean this in a bad way? Like are you mad? Are you happy? Are you sad? Like it makes me, and like these are just like the like thoughts of a very anxious person, which like is what I am.
Yeah. I don't know if you do this, but I feel like yes, because I do it, and you and I are the exact same. But I'm very self-aware, but I feel like in this day and age, I've become almost hyper aware to the point where it's like you're actually just being critical of yourself, and that like
Yes.
self-awareness isn't, it's not like impactful in any way. Like you're just doing yourself a disservice.
Totally. I actually was like thinking about that today because I think I like mentioned to you that I had to do this presentation at work,
Mm.
and I said something like I was like almost done. Okay. I was on like almost like the second last slide or something. And I said something and I was like, oh, wait, but like, will that come across as if I'm saying like this?
Mhm.
Because I don't mean to. And I literally stopped and had this internal dialogue. And I was like, you need to like not just stop in the middle of a freaking sentence. Like, you need to keep going. And so I think it was fine. Like, I played it off and I was just like, whatever. I don't know what I said. Like, I just kept going. But yeah, like, you're so aware of like the way people are looking at you too. Like,
Yeah.
thankfully, like, video on, but there's like also a lag, and like, you know, people freeze, or like your computer freezes or whatever. So I was talking, and then I literally like said something and I heard myself stop, was thinking like, oh shit, but I said this, but like I hope they don't mean that I meant it like this, because I actually did it. And I was like, you just have to keep going. Like you can't just stop in the middle
Yeah.
of a freaking presentation. And so I think it was exaggerated in my mind how long I actually stopped for. I don't think I was actually like silent for like more than like a few seconds. But yeah, like you're so like hyper aware and hyper critical of yourself all the time, and that like is all like that takes work to like figure out and undo all in and of itself, like let alone doing the work to even figure out things about yourself,
Yeah.
you know?
You brought up a really good point, which I feel like is the perfect segue from this, which is building connection is largely based on knowing yourself, but also getting to know the people around you. And we have become, as a society, so obsessed with these personality tests and like needing to know and label who we are, what we are, what group we're a part of. Like I think of that Myers-Briggs test.
Yeah.
Every single test that like is to exist, Tree and I have come up with the same exact answer. So for example, for Myers-Briggs, we're both ENFP.
Yeah.
Our primary love language is words of affirmation, and we both have an anxious attachment style.
That's just because
So
I have an anxious everything style. Anxiety is my love language. Like, if you can understand my anxiety, like we're speaking the same love language. Like my Myers-Briggs personality type is anxious.
I'm just anxious
um
everywhere.
yeah, my everything is just anxious. Like whichever one is anxiety, that's me. Definition in a freaking dictionary is me for anxiety. No, it's true. I feel like people are really obsessed with taking it because they're so obsessed with being like, and like me included, of being like, what does this say about me? Like you and I especially are so into like the deeper meaning of
Yeah.
things, or like digging, literally being like, I'm so curious, I need to dig deeper. Like why is this the way that it is? Like why am I acting like this? Why did this person say this? Where is this stemming from? Like we go so deep. Like we actually just go like way too deep. But I think part of like that is like taking personality tests and being like, what does this say about me? Like da 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 da. Like what does this mean? Like what is this like how do I communicate? How do I not communicate? Like learning about yourself is such a lifelong and like constantly moving target because you're obviously always changing. That I feel like people rely so heavily on these tests that they like it's like they rely on them too much. They don't even take the time to understand what they might be going through or what it might mean for themselves.
Yeah, like putting context behind the answer that they
Exactly.
get. I feel like exactly with what you said too, sometimes people let the tests or the answers to these tests define them versus actually letting themselves define the test. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I do. Instead of being like reading a question and being like, "Oh, what would I do?" They're like, "Okay, these are my four options. What would I do?" It's
Yeah.
like you can just have your own what you would do.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to be so like siloed into a
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
I know something that we really talk about are the love languages. So we were just saying that like our primary love language is words of affirmation, but I found out about love languages, I would say I think it was like last year or the year before, and I found them really helpful. But you were reading that there was a lot of controversy around them.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what love languages are, there's five love languages. They're words of affirmation, gift giving, quality time, physical touch, and acts of service. Um, and what it means, what your love language is just basically how you best receive love and how you most naturally give love. So like if your love language is words of affirmation, it's going to mean more to you if somebody says something nice to you versus if they got you a gift. And like how you would show somebody you loved them is you would say something nice to them. And so that's basically what love languages are in a nutshell. And so people use it all the time to be like, oh, my love language is blah blah blah, and so I want my partner, like for example, my love language is gift giving, so it's important for me that my partner um, gives me gifts, just as an example. But yeah, one of their criticisms was that people, when they like learn love languages, and it's kind of what we like had mentioned about other personality tests too, it's like when people learn their partner or their friend or whoever's love language, they'll be like, okay, that's your love language, like cool, like that's what I'm gonna do. Like your love language is gift giving, I'm just gonna like abandon everything and just like always give you gifts to show that I care about you. And like what that does is, one, it's kind of like what you said, it like really silos you into like one thing, because what is true more often than not is that you're like a mix of love languages. um And also like it takes away the most important thing in a relationship, which is like just to be able to like communicate well or like communicate efficiently. And people like use whether it's your love language or whether it's like your Myers-Briggs type test, whatever, and be like, oh, okay, like that's how I do it. But like it doesn't take in. So one, it's like people use it as a blanket, and then other important facets of a functioning relationship fall because you're relying so heavily on this. And then the second thing is that even though you might get a specific type of like Myers-Briggs personality type or a specific love language, it doesn't take into consideration like the different like lived experiences or like cultural nuances or like, you know, things that you have experienced that might inform your love language or might like add more like perspective to what your love language might be. So like for example, one of the love languages is physical touch, but if you've had like a traumatic experience with your physical touch or like your barrier being like violated, like you might that like that could like that's a big part of why it won't be your love language, and it could actually be like traumatic, but it just doesn't take that into consideration. Or if you will like come from a cultural background where physical touch isn't something that they do as often, it might just be it's like not so much like how do you receive love, it's like actually a combination of like your experiences and like how you grew up.
It's not really so much like uh I guess verbatim what that love language is. That's
Yeah.
exactly what your relationship stems from or grows from. It's a combination of
Yeah.
different things.
Exactly. And maybe like if you're somebody who like didn't come from like maybe love language, your love language is absolutely not physical touch, maybe like the to like show love is like if you and your partner, just as an example, are able to foster that as a love language, like physical touch as a love language, because I don't know, like you can like build that intimacy or you can like build that sense of connection even though it's like not your love language. So the criticism was that it just doesn't take all of those things into consideration, which I
Mhm.
think people are guilty of doing. They're guilty of being like, okay, this is it, thank you, goodbye, the end.
Which makes sense because I feel like the age in which we're living in, people just they want fast and they want convenience, and to read something and be like, okay, well, if that's what it's gonna take to make my relationship work, then I'll just take that and run with it. But that's not the full story. Like there's more work that goes into it.
Yeah, exactly. There's more work that goes into it. And in addition, like the work is also that it won't be like what like one thing where it's like, oh, their love language or their personality type is this, and so I just do this, okay, at the end it's like they can always be changing, like they can always be like, and so will you. And it's not like a replacement of like the other parts of a relationship that are like showing up for the other person, like communicating, like supporting them, like it's not in lieu of all these things, it's in addition to.
Something that I've been thinking about recently, and this has something to do with the Myers-Briggs test because part of our personality type is that we're extroverted, but I'm actually finding
Yeah.
that the more time I spend at home and the more I'm like, I guess, less exposed to people, the more introverted I'm becoming. And the constant like screen time where it's like you're meeting with people like through work or I'm personally finding there's like an increase in the amount of times that we meet throughout the day. I am
Yeah.
exhausted by the end of it. And so I find more than ever I just need more time for myself to
Yeah.
re-energize within my own space. So
No,
I'd like that, like that whole thing about us being ENFP, I almost feel like I'm becoming INFP.
it's so interesting that you say that because I was talking to my sister, and when like she's obviously in grade school and so or elementary school, and so when like schools were shut down she wasn't going to school, and she's like super extroverted, and she kept being like, oh, like I wish I could go back to school, like I hate doing virtual school, blah blah blah, and she like couldn't wait to go back. And then she's been back now for a couple months only, and or not even, she's been back for like a month and a half, and yesterday or the day before she was like, ugh, like I don't want to go to school, like I just want to switch to online. And it's exactly what you said. Like, you are at home and you get so used to like doing things that way, and like not communicating with people, like not being around people, like not having to like, like interact or have that like constant like sensory like overload, and like having to like decipher what you want to focus on, that when you go back to doing it, like, it's really hard. And so like I was talking to my mom about how it's really hard for people who are in like very impressionable ages of their lives, um which you can argue sorry, which you can argue is like every single time of your life, because like you're going through something different in every stage of your life, that this will impact. But it's really hard when you're like building those foundational blocks to like have this be such a strain.
Yeah, I can't even imagine being your sister's age and having to go through this like
Yeah.
constant flip-flop of like being at school or being online. It's being able to see your friends or not. It's a lot to take on for someone who's only 13,
Yeah.
14.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
it's I feel like the pandemic has hit everyone uniquely, but in different ways. Like I just said the same thing twice, but like it's hit everyone in a hard way, but in a unique way. So I feel like for us, we've just had to completely adapt to a environment and lifestyle that we would not have had to if we weren't in this situation. Like I can't imagine within our industries us working from home just because
Yeah.
like we are so people based for a lack of a
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Totally. Um, yeah, no, I think it's just like, I think even after the pandemic, like it's going to be a sort of mix of like, it's not going to go back to the way that it was before. And I think that that has like really like real effects on people and how they communicate and how they want to communicate, and like what that like how it impacts their future. But okay, I feel like we just started talking about the pandemic. And we're like, yeah, the pandemic is hard. The story of our literal lives.
Oh no.
Like I
I
feel like we
didn't
didn't.
even notice. I literally didn't even notice until you were like, no, it's time to pull ourselves out of this hole.
Yeah, I literally I feel like we talked about love languages for 1 minute.
Next week's episode is gonna be about love languages.
Just delete the post. Delete the post.
The whole
Delete it. We lied. We freaking lied to you. We wanted it to be about love languages, and then it wasn't. So we lied.
I actually don't think that it's bad that we bring up the pandemic. I think it says a lot that like it's just become our reality and we can't escape it no matter how hard we try, which apparently we don't try hard enough.
It's so funny because every time we try to talk about something and every time we start a conversation, it just ends up being back about the pandemic. And it just goes to show like how much it has infiltrated every single aspect of our life. And like obviously, because duh, we're living in a freaking pandemic, and like your every aspect of your life is impacted. Um, but that actually is a great time to one, figure things out about yourself, or like take the much needed time to focus on like what you might want or what you might like, or start visualizing things that like how you want things to be for you in the future, because time will go on and everybody will move forward regardless of whether or not we stay in this pandemic, which I genuinely pray that we don't, but it will obviously have lasting impacts. But love languages, learning about love languages is actually a great way. People talk a lot about like practicing self-care or like taking time for your mental health. Like learning your love language and just taking the test can be a great way to start to either learn about yourself or to like implement self-care. So like if your love language is, I don't know, like if it is acts of service, like do something good for yourself. Like if it's words of affirmation, like be kind to yourself. If it's gift giving, give yourself like buy yourself something nice. Like it's not just like these personality tests are not just about learning about yourself and then expecting somebody else to know it about you. It's learning about yourself so that you can truly know, like you can be fully safe and like stable within yourself.
It's so
So
funny every time we talk about anything and then it ends up coming back to the pandemic because it's come to a point where like I don't even realize it, but Trevini will be like, okay, we need to stop. Like we are going into this like dark hole and we won't be able to get out until we stop now. So I actually find it hilarious that you and I just went on a almost tangent on the pandemic
yeah,
and then we managed to stop ourselves. But what I was
because
gonna say,
I remember you said that because our episodes were like bleak. They were sad. Like they were legit sad. I would listen to them and I'd like start crying. I'd be like, tear, tear. Like, why am I so sad? And it's like because we just echo chamber each other and we like spiral. Like we literally like feed off of
because
each other and just
we're
right?
anxious, we're anxiety and personified.
Literally, we are anxiety personified. That I was like, we have to stop. Like we can't do that. We can't just like bounce off the other person deeper. We need to pull each other up.
I love it. I'm here. I'm honestly, I'm here for this energy. 1,000%. Yes. I find I love this idea of like connecting back with yourself because as we mentioned, like being able to fully connect with other people has taken a bit of a toll and that's become a bit of a struggle. But being able to connect back with yourself is something that has remained constant. And I feel like, especially with the love languages, you know, you can, it doesn't have to be your primary love language in order for it to translate to self-love and self-care. I think if you
Yeah.
find ways to adapt to find something like within all of the love languages and you find ways to adapt it for yourself, you're doing more for yourself even within those small things than maybe you did the day before.